Thank you for joining us. I'm at the Worldwide Christian Center Church in Pompano Beach, Florida, where the congregation is celebrating its 25th anniversary. One of the special guests attending this event is Congressman Allen West. With so many issues of concern facing society as a whole, including education, political reform, the economy, and so very much more, the need to address these issues is greater than ever, and Congressman Allen West will share his thoughts on these matters and his plans for the future following these messages. With us now is Congressman Colonel Allen West. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show, sir.
Absolutely, Richard. Thank you so much for having me.
Sir, a question I must ask you is, how will your faith and principles influence your decisions and actions and career in Congress?
Well, I think it's very important that my faith takes me through very difficult and hard times, when sometimes it seems that the things that are before you seem insurmountable. I think that that's when you can summon on a little bit extra strength. And I think that my faith also helps me with my wisdom and insight. You know, often I go back to, I believe it's 1 Kings chapter 3, where Solomon asked the Lord for the wisdom to lead the people, and that's the exact same prayer that I ask.
Another question I must ask you is, since you're with a new crowd, people you haven't really met before and will be very closely associating with in the future, including Keith Ellison, who supports Islam, how will you manage that, if I may ask? Because it's not really easy to be that polite often with individuals one totally disagrees with, which I believe may be the case.
Well, I think it's most important that I stand upon the principles that people elected me to go to Washington, D.C. and represent them on Capitol Hill, so that when you run into someone that is counter, or someone that really does represent the antithesis of the principles upon which this country was established, you've got to be able to defeat them intellectually in debate and discourse. And you have to just be able to challenge each and every one of their assertions very wisely and very forthright.
So what are your thoughts on the city of Jerusalem, its significance in today's world and historically?
Yeah. I mean, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And, you know, Israel has been around for, 5,771 years. You know, everyone wants to act like this thing, this state of Israel is something new to us. There's a modern state of Israel, but Israel has always existed, and Jerusalem has always been the capital. So I think one of the things we need to push for is that Jerusalem should not be divided, and Jerusalem should definitely never exist under a United Nations flag. It should exist under the flag of the state of Israel. And I think another thing that we must do to show that we are really committed to that happening is that the embassy, which is at Tel Aviv, should be moved to Jerusalem.
I certainly agree with you on that. And what are your thoughts with regards to the so-called peace process and the aspiration of some individuals to push for a two-state solution, and other individuals believing that there's no point in that there already are more than one Palestinian state?
Well, I think the most important thing we need to understand is compromise or negotiation has to come from a position of strength and not a perceived position of weakness. And as long as we continue to sacrifice land and we continue to get more rockets, missiles, or attacks, you are conducting a very Pavlovian experiment, because the actions that you're doing only get you more of bad behavior, negative behavior. So I think the most important thing we need to make the onus is that Israel will continue to exist. And all of these other Arabic states need to understand that and recognize Israel. And we can't create another state, quote-unquote Palestinian state, which will be nothing but another terrorist state, being it influenced by Hamas or being it influenced by Hezbollah. So I think that the most important thing is we need to make the opposition come to the table and say that they are going to recognize Israel, that they need to dismantle groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, some of the other groups that operate in and around Israel that seek her destruction.
So what is your position on the media war and how Israel is painted black, and how there are so many people in media worldwide who seem to be apologists for Islamic terrorists? Even the current administration has renamed some of the terms with regards to how they describe acts of terrorism. Tell us what your thoughts are on these.
Well, absolutely. You know, I've always been one to say you don't have a war on terror because terror is a tactic. One of the key things we must do is win the information operations war. You saw what happened after the Gaza flotilla, how that was so wrongly portrayed out into the media. And it's not just Israel, it's the United States as well that needs to do a better job of understanding that this is a propaganda war, it is an information war, and we need to be able to defeat them, and we need to have a media that will be on our side and tell our right story. Look, this whole thing about Palestine has nothing to do with Arabic people. Palestine has everything to do with 73 AD when Hadrian issued a decree to change the name from Judea to Palestine. So it's from that point we need to be able to get out the right message, a factual message, a historical message. And it is very disconcerting to me that when you look at the national security strategy of the United States of America, doesn't say anything about Islamic extremism or Islamic terrorism or Muslim extremism or jihadism. You know, it mentions global warming more than it does those things. So, you know, you cannot continue to try to wish this problem away or believe that this enemy does not exist. And one of the critical things I look at is when tolerance becomes a one-way street, it's going to lead to cultural suicide. So, you know, if we continue saying we're bad and they're okay, or we try to explain away everything, such as now what happened in Portland, Oregon, the question is, did the FBI entrap this young man instead of, being thankful that they were able to get this young man before he did have this van bombing at a Christmas celebration in Portland, Oregon. So I think we need to be very serious about facing this enemy. We need to declare who he is, this radical Islamism or Islamic totalitarianism, Islamic fascism, whatever you want to call it. But it does exist. And you've got to understand their goals and objectives before you can properly develop your own strategic goals and objectives. But the information aspect of it is incredibly important.
What saddens me and many people is the fact that the Middle East, if they would use their resources, if the Arab countries would use their resources to develop their countries and educate the masses and provide infrastructure and so forth,
but
so much more
that's
could be
not their
attained.
objective. See, that's not the objective of dictators, despots, autocrats, and theocrats. What they want to be able to do is continue to suppress the people and oppress their people and draw Israel, the United States of America, out to be the enemy so that it gives them a focus. Look, the bottom line is, so many people talk about, if you just surrender Israel, everything will go away. Most of the early speeches of Osama bin Laden never talked about Israel. It's just their hatred of the West. It's just their, ongoing conquest of Islamism to be what it is. And it's imperialistic in nature. And so the challenge for us now is to recognize that threat and stand up against it. But you're not going to see the leaders in the Islamic world stand up because they are the ones who are profiting from, portraying us as the enemies so that, the Palestinian people, they're nothing but pawns in this thing. So, someone needs to be able to recognize that.
Precisely, that's what would you do to suggest a better way to enhance and reinforce efforts to increase patriotism and appropriately decent values among the masses of the United States at this time in history?
It starts with education. We need to go back and educate our kids about, the Constitution and how this republic was established. We need to educate our kids about the history of this country. I think it was last year or earlier this year when we had a debate about how they were going to have textbooks, accepted out in Texas, Department of Education, that was not going to, talk about history in the United States prior to 1877. So if you have that, if you don't talk about the French and Indian War, if you don't talk about how we came about, how the colonies formed, you don't talk about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, you don't talk about the Federalist Papers, you don't talk about the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, or even the Civil War, I mean, you really lose an essence of understanding the foundational principles and values of this country and also some of the struggles that we have had. So I think it starts first and foremost with educating the young people in the United States of America that America is an exceptional nation and America does have exceptional people. But it also means that we've got to have a good and honest conversation about Israel, about some of our other allies that we have, and stop trying to sugarcoat and glossy paint our enemies, which is even more dangerous.
Speaking of enemies, what are your thoughts on the threat that Iran represents to civilization at this time?
It's an immense threat. I think that we're living a 1930s Neville Chamberlain moment, whereby if we continue to believe that you can appease a despot and the theocrats that are there in Iran, you know, mutually assured destruction, the MAD theory that we had with the Soviet Union, that's out the window. Because their basis is to get a device, which they will use, because in order to have the return of the Mahdi, the hidden Imam, it will take an apocalyptic event. And when you have Mahmoud Ahmadinejad stand in Lebanon, face toward Israel, and say that we're going to destroy the Zionist state, what more do you need?
Well, it is disconcerting, and I hope to God that there will be some positive solutions that will be brought about by individuals such as yourself, sir. I'd like to ask you to look ahead. What legacy are you going to bring in your career as a member of Congress?
Wow, I mean, I'm just kind of getting started and we're talking about legacy. I think the most important thing is we have got to have principled leadership in this country. We have got to have leadership that is rooted in the history and understanding who we are. And we have to have leadership that is not afraid to stand and to speak out and to convict others, and not let others convict us and make us recalcitrant in taking the right and proper actions to protect the American people and also to protect our allies worldwide.
So I want to wish you a lot of success in your career in Congress. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show again.
Thanks, Richard, and call upon me anytime.
I'll be delighted and honored to do so, sir. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be right back.